Hey Pretty Girl Club. So this is going to be a part two of the video that I made called Pretty Privilege versus Sexualization. So I want to make a part two because I just feel like no other creators have really talked about this. And I've also noticed that some women, they seem to conflate pretty privilege with being sexually desired. We all know that a lot of men will screw anything with a hole. In countries like Colombia, there are men who are literally having smacks with donkeys. Like there are men who will literally use any sort of tool, any sort of open space that makes their D feel good. So I never viewed sexualization as having the same type of social power as pretty privilege. So I do think you can use sex as a form of power if you are maybe an actual ex worker, like if that is your career or if that's something you're getting paid off of. But I will say, even when it comes to actual ex workers, name one extremely successful ex worker that does not have pretty privilege. So, any woman who is viewed as a sex symbol, she's usually coupling sexualization with pretty privilege. But this video is focusing on women who they're being sexualized, but they do not have the pretty privilege. So these are women who some people would call them ugly, some people would call them medium ugly, some people would call them average at best. Sometimes people call them a butterface. So we're going to be talking about the psychology of those women and the difference between those women versus the women who have pretty privilege. So number one, a woman who has pretty privilege, she is often celebrated and shown off. So people want to be seen in public with the girl who has pretty privilege. But a woman who is sexualized, that woman is often hidden in the shadows. So these are the women to where they only get male attention between 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. You know, this is the one where it's like maybe the little boy wants to meet you after school. He wants to meet you behind the school. He wants to go off into the shadows. He wants to meet you underneath the bleachers because he doesn't want his boys to see that he is sleeping with you. That's one of the differences between pretty privilege versus sexualization. So do you see how pretty privilege, there's almost like this admiration that comes with it. And I feel like if somebody is just being sexualized, there's almost like this disrespect that comes with being sexualized when you do not have pretty privilege coupled up with it. Number two, women who rely on sexualization often take photos and crop their entire face out, or they focus more on their body when it comes to like getting work done. Let's say they want to get plastic surgery. Let's say they want to improve their looks. The focus tends to be more on their body than their actual face. Because a lot of women who don't have the pretty privilege, they feel like their face card declines. And I'm not making fun of it, but it's like that truly is some women's experience. They feel like their face card declines. They don't have the pretty face. They don't have that beautiful smile with the beautiful lips and the clear, smooth skin and all that. They don't have that. So they have to rely on making their body as attractive as possible. But I've noticed another thing too. If a woman does not have any pretty privilege, sometimes she will just emphasize her sexual body parts. So maybe she gets a big giant boob job and a big giant BBL, or, you know, she's just focusing on that because she feels like in her natural state, she's not able to get the same treatment as somebody who has the pretty privilege. So with women who have pretty privilege, having sex, that's an option. It's not something where it's like, oh, we have to have sex just to open the door. And that leads me to number three. A sexualized woman, she has to use sex as her barrier to entry. So you know those women where they have a reputation before you even meet them? They have a reputation for being sexual before you even know who they are? So that's what I'm talking about. A lot of women feel like they can't compete. So this goes back to that hierarchy mindset that I always talk about. Any insecurities that a woman has, usually they come from a hierarchy mindset. So a lot of sexualized women, they feel inferior to pretty privileged women. And I'm talking about sexualized women who are not pretty. Okay, so they feel inferior to you. And so they feel like the only way to compete, the only way to get attention, the only way to get a text back is if you bust it wide open and bend it over. Number four, they will do outlandish sexual activities in public spaces. So when I say sexual activities, I'm not talking about having sex. No, these are the women who jump onto tables and start twerking when it's not a twerking setting. These are women who flip up their tops. You know, they show their boobs when it's not a setting to be doing that. These are the women who are like, you know, they're pouring water on their t-shirt so they have like a wet t-shirt. So they're randomly making things sexual when it's not a setting for that because they feel like that's the only way they can get attention. Have you ever been around a woman where she's around a group of girls, she's chill, but then suddenly if a man comes around, she just randomly wants to talk about sex. She randomly wants to talk about her body parts. She randomly wants to talk about how wet she is all the time or like what kind of underwear she's wearing. And it's like you're shocked because it's so outlandish. Well, that's how they get attention. They have to use that shock factor. Have you ever noticed that when it comes to porn, a lot of porn, the thumbnails or the titles and stuff will be super shocking, like the images will be shocking. So if a woman is using a lot of shock factor just to get a man to turn his head, that's a sign that that's not pretty privilege. She's just sexualizing herself. So she is saying something shocking, she's doing something shocking like twerking on tables randomly when it is not a twerking setting, or she is wearing something shocking. So these are the women where they come to pick their kids up from school and maybe they're wearing like a see-through top where like you can see their nipples or something, or they're wearing like these fishnets around the kindergarten class. So they're doing these things because it's almost like letting off a siren, like, hey, look at me. So she's not able to get that many heads turning with her pretty face. So she has to use the fishnets. She has to use these different tools in order to like make herself more attention grabbing. Number 4, she views sex as a competition. Have you ever noticed that women who sexualize themselves, they brag about how many men want to sleep with them? They brag about how they slept with a man and he came back for more. They'll say, oh, my cat is so good that he came back for seconds. Okay, so that's a woman who she doesn't really have other things that she can brag about. She's not privilege stacking, basically. So she doesn't have other privileges such as pretty privilege or maybe wealth or education privilege. No, the only area where she feels safe is in the bedroom. That's the only area where she feels safe. And it's pretty ironic that that would be the only area you'd feel safe because unfortunately, a lot of women who over-sexualize themselves have way more sexual traumas that they don't even realize are traumas. They think that it's normal. So, for example, a lot of them tend to be more accepting of deviant behaviors. So, for example, have you ever noticed how a lot of women who sexualize themselves, they'll be like, oh, well, most men are going to cheat anyway, so I'll just go ahead and be the side chick. Well, most men, they're on the DL anyway, so I'll just go ahead and settle for a guy who likes men as well. And it's like, they'll be tolerating some of the craziest shit, and you're thinking to yourself, why would she tolerate this? Well, it's because that's a woman who doesn't have the pretty privileged experience. She doesn't have the experience of being admired outside of the bedroom. She feels like the only place where she is relevant is when it comes to the bedroom. That's the only time she's relevant, is when her booty is out. It's when her legs are open. And so a lot of times men, they will actually take advantage of those types of women because they view those women as easy and weak. And when I say easy, what I mean is easy sexual access. And I'm talking about women who are sleeping with men for free. I'm not talking about women where their job is, they're getting paid to take photos or something. No, I'm talking about women where they're literally busting it wide open because a man gave her a compliment. This is the woman where she will sleep with anyone. She'll sleep with your boyfriend. She'll sleep with her sister's boyfriend. Literally anybody is fair game to her. Because in her mind, sex is about power. Okay, I think I'm on number 5. A lot of women who do not have the pretty privilege, they have a fear of aging. So there's this fear of aging because in their mind, they feel like older women are not perceived as being as sexually attractive. And because they don't have the pretty privilege and the admiration and the status that comes from the pretty privilege, they're afraid of no longer being sexy. And so that's why you see some of them getting upset when they start aging, or they start making fun of other women when they're aging, or they make fun of women who are older because they associate men's sexual desires with wanting youth. Because if you look at porn culture, a lot of porn is based on like, oh, teenagers, or like, look at some of the titles and thumbnails. It'll say like, so-and-so sleeps with a teenage schoolgirl, or, it'll show like young women, often underage, on all of these porn videos. And so you see a lot of sexualized women following a youthful beauty standard. So they feel like beauty is scarce. They don't feel like beauty is abundant. They feel like there's only one way to be beautiful, and it is by being youthful and also by being as sexualized as possible. so that you can cater to men's fantasies of sleeping with an underage girl. So that's why a lot of times when it comes to sexualized women, that's the argument they'll make. It's like, oh, she's old and she's dried up. You know, they'll say, oh, her cat is dried up. She has cobwebs down there. And it's like, okay, she's revealing that she doesn't have pretty privilege. She has more of a sexualized self-image. That's how she gets her sense of power. Also, I don't know if I talked about this in my other video, but pretty privileged women tend to be the one that got away, whereas sexualized women are the ones that you want to go away. So the sexualized women, those are the ones where it's like, this man will deny that he ever knew her. He'll deny that he slept with her. He doesn't want to be seen with her. Whereas the pretty privileged woman, that's the one that the guy is always chasing emotionally. It's the one that he kind of emotionally longs for, if that makes sense. A lot of times, pretty privileged women are more associated with purity and innocence, whereas sexualized women are sometimes associated with being defiled or being kind of like dirty. So that there are pros and cons. Remember, there are pros and cons to every form of privilege. So there is a such thing as sexual privilege. I just think that that tends to be more of a male-centered privilege. So, well, if you're a heterosexual woman, it tends to be more male-centered. Number 7, you have to meet a man's fantasy in order to attain your sexual privilege. This is why you'll see sexualized women obsessing over how perfect is your wig? How perfect is your makeup? Oh my God, did you get a boob job? Oh, you need another one. You need to go bigger with your boobs. You need to go bigger with the butt. You need to go more dramatic with your lips. So it's kind of like their aesthetic is based on a dramatized or exaggerated aesthetic. Whereas a pretty privileged woman, she could be wearing a messed up outfit, you know, just a t-shirt. She could have acne scars and still be pretty because her face card doesn't decline. She could have a ratchet wig on. She could have a bad hairstyle and she's still pretty because her actual face is where the beauty is coming from. So with a lot of sexualized women, they have to rely on kind of creating a fantasy. So oftentimes women who sexualize themselves, they rely on more external tools, such as sex toys, whips and chains and handcuffs and whatever, lingerie, accessories, beauty enhancements. Whereas a woman who's already pretty privileged, like let's say she has a gorgeous face, a naturally nice body. It may not be the most dramatic body. She may not have surgery on her body, but she has pretty privilege. So it's kind of like internal versus external enhancements. It's almost like the pretty privileged women don't need all these extra tools and gimmicks. Sex relies on a lot of gimmicks. A lot of times sex culture relies on novelty as well. So sexualized women, they feel more pressure to switch it up. So that's why sometimes you'll see sexualized women, they'll be switching up their wigs so often that their whole entire edges are ripped out. Why? Well, it's because they were so focused on trying to create a fantasy to the point where their actual natural beauty didn't matter. So sometimes you'll see women sacrificing everything else so they can appeal to a man's sexual desires. So that's why sometimes you'll see women where it's like, maybe they had a BBL, but it's like a really big one to where it damages their body, or, you know, they may end up unaliving themselves because that's how dramatic their surgery was, or maybe they got the big boob job to where their entire back is hurting now. So sometimes you'll see a side effect of over-sexualizing herself where she's sacrificing her natural beauty because, you know, she doesn't have any, or she doesn't believe she has any. And she's doing all of this so she can appeal to a man's sexual fantasy. Another habit of these types of women is they tend to chase trends. So it's almost as if they're never satisfied because sex culture is based on novelty, it's based on variety. So these are the women where it's like maybe they got a plastic surgery and it looked good, but then they got another one and it still looks good. But then after 5, 10, 15, 20 surgeries, now they look like a totally different person. Well, a lot of times, and especially if the surgeries are all on their body, so they don't care about their face because they feel like they already don't have the face. But a lot of times those types of women, they're definitely women who are operating more so in a sexual privilege versus pretty privilege. So they're not relying on their face. Their face does not give them a status. They don't get social status from their face. That's pretty much a way to summarize it right there. They're not getting social status based on their face. They don't get social status based on their pretty hair. They don't get social status based on their pretty eyes, their pretty features, their pretty lips, their pretty teeth, their pretty smile. No, that's not what their status is based on. Their status is based on how sexually available they are to men. And so that's why sometimes you'll see these women where they will create Instagram accounts or Finstas where they crop their whole face out of it. They don't want to show their face because their face does nothing for the photo. They feel like their face card declines. So they're like, look, let me just crop my face out. Let me just only show my boobs, or I only show my butt. Let me hide my face. Have you ever noticed that? A lot of women who don't have pretty privilege, they don't want to show off their face because they don't get any compliments on their face. That's a sign that she does not have pretty privilege. She's more like medium. I don't like calling women just ugly. So I tend to use the word medium, or sometimes people will say medium ugly. So these are women where they don't get compliments on having a beautiful face. They've never had somebody be like, oh my God, your face is so stunning. I want you to like be a model for my company, or I want to do your makeup. Oh, how can I do my makeup like you? No, because they don't have pretty face privilege. So that's why sometimes you can see these women, like they'll expose themselves because you'll be like, okay, what do you think is your prettiest feature? And they'll be like, oh, my butt. What do you think is your prettiest feature? My thighs, my boobs, my nipples. It's like, wait, what? Why would you not name your face? Isn't your face beautiful? So if they're emphasizing any other body part as being the prettiest part of them and it's not their face, that is a sign that she does not identify as having pretty privilege in terms of her actual face. So she believes that her face card declines. Number 7 is catfish culture. Have you ever noticed that usually it's the non-pretty privileged women who are the main catfishes? These are the ones who hide behind avatars on YouTube. They hide behind women who have a pretty face while simultaneously bragging about their sexual desirability. Well, yeah, they brag about sexual desirability because they can't brag about how beautiful their face is. They can't brag about being stunning. They can't talk about the social status that they've received from having a beautiful face. So that's why you'll see a lot of them participating in catfishing. So not just on YouTube, but also on Instagram or on dating apps. Like you'll see women create a dating app where it's like just their body or something. So it doesn't even show their face. It just shows like their boobs or something. And then they just want to chat with men because they're not used to being able to get any attention at all just by showing a regular photo like smiling. They have to show their butt. They have to show their boobs. They literally are relying on their sexual body parts for survival. They're relying on their sexual body parts in order to be seen. They feel like the only way they can be seen is with their butt. Their butt is going to make it so they can be seen. And that's why a lot of them have a problem with like modesty culture. So when it comes to modesty culture, I think there's a spectrum. Obviously, I'm not talking about like wearing a burqa or something. But I have noticed women who don't have pretty privilege, yeah, they do feel ugly in a t-shirt and jeans. They do feel frumpy in a t-shirt and jeans. Whereas a woman who has a pretty face, she looks like a model in a t-shirt and jeans. You know, she looks like a pretty girl. She still gets the attention. But sexualized women, their privilege is directly correlated to how much skin they show, how much cleavage they show, how much booty they show. So their outfits, I noticed they put a lot more pressure on the types of outfits they wear. And then sometimes they'll project that onto others and say, oh, well, her outfit's ugly. Well, no, it's actually not, because she has a gorgeous face. So she can wear a baggy ass sweater and still get attention. She still gets a pedestal. She can have acne marks and still get attention because her actual face is pretty. So that's different from a woman who sexualizes herself, where she's like, oh no, I have to have the crop top with the fishnets, with the cleavage, and then my booty showing. Like, I have to have it all coming together perfectly so I can emphasize my body. So one type of privilege emphasizes your sexual body parts, whereas the other type of privilege just emphasizes basically your non-sexual body parts. So like your face or your hair or maybe your skin. So that's more of a non-sexual body part. I think I'm on number 9. Once he gets turned off, your privilege is turned off. So, once he's done, once he's finished, once he's done for the evening, once he is no longer turned on, then he treats that woman differently. Versus a woman who is pretty privileged, her privilege isn't necessarily coming from how turned on a man is. And also, not to mention the fact that people do actually get turned on by someone having a beautiful face. So it's just different. It's not dependent. her relevance is not dependent upon how turned on a man is. Not to mention the fact that you can have pretty privilege and be decentered from men because there are different opportunities you can get. Whereas when it comes to sexualization, it's very difficult to have sexual privilege outside of the male gaze, because even if you look at sexy models and stuff, those women have pretty faces. So if you don't have the face, if the face is declining, you're not getting the modeling job. They're not saying, oh, I want to put you in the Victoria's Secret fashion show. No, those women have pretty faces. Number 10, a lot of women feel socially invisible when they do not have pretty privilege. So if they don't have the face, oftentimes they get ignored in social settings. They get overlooked in group conversations. They get interrupted more often. So they feel invisible. Whenever they're out in the real world, like during the daytime, they feel invisible. At night, when the freaks come out, that's the only time they feel visible. During the daytime, whether it's like at work or something, or just walking down the street, no. They have social invisibility. So they have more of a need to prove themselves. That's another thing too. Have you ever noticed this? Women who do not have pretty privilege, they're always worried about how other people are not talented enough. They don't deserve what they have. Well, that's because if you don't have pretty privilege, if you're considered ugly in the face, a lot of people will overlook you, even if you are talented. So that's one of their traumas. It's constantly feeling overlooked. But they won't admit it's because of their face. So sometimes they try to blame it on other things, such as an ism, or, they'll try to blame it on something else. But I think that it really is them not having pretty privilege, or feeling like they don't have pretty privilege in terms of their face. Number 11, dating disparities and rejection trauma. She might be approached less for dates, or maybe she's never been asked on a date at all. She's only approached by men who think that she is an easier target because she has lower confidence usually. Okay, so some men also will fetishize this type of woman in a cruel way. So they see her as somebody to use. They see her as someone they can easily discard because they assume that this type of woman has low standards, low self-esteem, because she doesn't have that pretty privilege. She doesn't have a whole bunch of men that would love to take her on a date. No. She's not the girl that guys view as taking on a date. A lot of times they view her as just basically like a cum dumpster. I hate to say it like that. That's very vulgar. But a lot of them have repeated rejection, or they feel romantically invisible. So that's a phrase that I just kind of thought of today. Feeling romantically invisible. Remember how I said in the last episode that pretty privileged women get romanticized? But then when it comes to sexualized women, there's more of a fantasy about just dominating her. Calling her names like bitch, whore, slut. So kind of dominating and subjugating her. That's the fantasy when it comes to a sexualized woman. It's more about your personal power. It's more about you feeling desired. Whereas with a pretty privileged woman, you desire her. I also talked in the last episode about how pretty privilege is viewed as more rare than sexual privilege, because every woman has sexual body parts. Every woman has a vagina. Every woman has a butt. Every woman has boobs. So I think that's a part of the reason that some men feel like they can easily throw away that type of woman. Am I saying it's okay? No, it's not okay. That's why I tell you guys to decenter men. Because they're going to treat you like shit, especially if you're smeggsualizing yourself and not getting paid. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm on number 12. Workplace bias. A woman who does not have pretty privilege, she may be passed over for roles that favor attractive women. So she doesn't have the face card. She can't be the hostess. She can't be the real estate agent. She can't do the modeling thing. She can't do anything where it's like her face is at the forefront of it. So these women, they get overlooked in favor of the pretty privileged woman. So that's why you see these women having to sleep their way to the top. It's not because they want to sleep their way to the top. It's because they feel like they have to. So they feel more pressure. They put pressure on themselves to have smacks in order to get that job, or, they feel like, oh, I got to make something happen. I only got 2 more days with this man. I only have 1 more opportunity to impress him. So she has to use her body parts to impress a man. That's another thing too. Smeggsualized women, they have to constantly keep up with smeggsual trends. So believe it or not, there actually is a such thing as a sexual trend. So for example, in corn culture, they have different trends depending on the decade, depending on what people are clicking on. They're constantly inventing more and more shocking trends to include in pornographic media. So a woman who is sexualizing herself, she has to keep up with all of these different things. Because remember, sex thrives on things like novelty, sex culture. It thrives on things like novelty, variety, shock factor. So that woman who is relying on sexualizing herself and doesn't have pretty privilege, these are the women who are going to all these different like parties. And have you guys ever heard of people going to like the different like orgies or the different like festivals where they're learning all this stuff, or they're watching people like have sex on stage and all that? So they have to do all this crazy stuff. They have to go out of their way, learn all these different skills, learn about all the different toys, all the different products, all the new trends, watch all the new porn that's coming out. They have to study all the OF girls. They have to study all these up and coming like strippers or whatever, just so they can keep their place in the market. So it's this constant uphill battle of trying to figure out, okay, what tricks can I do in the bedroom to try to keep this guy there? And then they'll project that onto pretty privileged women and say, well, you're boring. Okay, well, she doesn't have to be very interesting. Her beauty makes her interesting. Her face is interesting enough. So yeah, that's why she doesn't have to take out a whole bunch of whips and chains 24/7, because the guy or society as a whole views her as enough just based on her face. So yeah, it's not fair. It's very messed up. But that is one of the downsides of women who do not have pretty privilege, but they're trying to use sexual privilege. I forgot what number I'm on, but developing internalized misogyny or bitterness. Think about the types of men that surround themselves with over-sexualized women. Usually these are extremely misogynistic men. So if you are sleeping with a whole bunch of men and they're all misogynists, and maybe they're calling you names during sex, names that you don't like, they're calling you names during sex, or they're like downplaying you, or in some cases, men will actually triangulate your sexual prowess with another woman. I've seen men do that before, where they'll be like, oh, I cheated on you because this other girl did a better job at having sex. So a lot of sexualized women have more traumas like that. Usually the pretty privileged women, especially if that pretty privileged woman has not slept with a lot of guys, she doesn't even have that many encounters to even deal with that. But the women who are sexualizing themselves and they're dealing with all this triangulation, so this man saying, oh, well, why don't you do it like my ex? My ex used to do XYZ in the bedroom. So a lot of those women, they deal with more comparison. They deal with more sexual competition, more comparison. So sometimes they resent pretty privileged women because they're like, it's not fair. She just gets to exist and she gets the princess treatment. She just gets to exist and she gets the door held open for her. She just gets to exist and she gets opportunities to make money, and she doesn't have to take off her clothes. She doesn't have to bust it open and bend it over. She doesn't have to do all these crazy moves and form her body into a pretzel just to capture someone's attention for a couple days. And so that's where that deep-seated envy and rage comes. I mean, think of how enraging that would be. I mean, I would be enraged. If I was seriously like unattractive and I was doing all this stuff, keeping up with all this stuff, spending all my money on different toys and whips and chains and all that, and going out of my way trying to impress a man to get him to stay, and then somebody comes along and she just has a pretty face. So she was just born that way, or maybe she knew how to do her little skincare routine or her little makeup routine. So that's all she had to do was just put a couple of powders on her face, some blush and some lipstick, and she gets to be treated with softness. She gets to rest in her femininity. Yeah, I can see why a lot of sexualized women get very enraged when we start talking about pretty privilege. And another thing they'll try to do is create a hierarchy. They'll be like, oh, well, my beauty is more powerful because he cheated on you with me. Okay, no, just because a man made you his side chick, that definitely does not mean like, oh my God, you must be so gorgeous and beautiful because he made you the side chick. No, all that means is that he lacks discipline. He can't keep his D in his pants. Now let's talk about some of the coping mechanisms that sexualized women have to deal with. So number one is using sex as a weapon, or using it as a currency. So like I said, they'll make comments like, oh, well, your cat is dried up. You've got cobwebs down there. So they'll make fun of women who are not sexually active. Let's say you decenter men and you are celibate. They will say like, oh, you're a lesbian. So they're actually using like a homophobic type of talking point So you need to prove that you're straight by going and having casual sex. So do you see how that's actually a toxic coping mechanism? Because she's trying to weaponize sexuality against you. So they will treat sex as the only way to gain power. They feel like sexual attention is the most powerful attention they can receive. And maybe it is, because they don't get attention for their pretty face. They don't get attention for their intelligence. They don't get attention for their phenotype or their family background or their socioeconomic status. So that's why sometimes you'll see them trying to weaponize sexual attention as a way to gain power. Number 2, seducing in order to manipulate others. So they have a tendency to rely more so on sexual seduction. So they may do this with friends, bosses, men in relationships, your husband, your boyfriend, your brother. So a lot of these women, they have to rely on seduction because their face is not captivating. You know, she can't bat her eyelashes and get what she wants. No, absolutely not. She has to twerk her ass to get what she wants. So that's more work. You're literally using more of your body, using more of your muscles. That is more physically tiring. She can't just blink. I mean, think about it. Batting your eyelashes, that means you're just blinking. So yeah, she can't just blink at a man and get what she wants. No, she has to get up on the pole. She has to twerk that ass. She has to sleep with a guy. And again, I'm talking about women who do this unpaid. They're doing this unpaid. They're doing this in hopes of one day getting paid. And number 3 is they confuse being desired with being respected or being loved. So they conflate sex with love. So they feel like if I'm not sexually wanted, I'm invisible. Number 4, their entire identity revolves around looking sexy, being quote unquote the baddest, or being envied for her body. So not being envied for her face, because her face card declines. But it's about being envied for her body. This is where you get the women that make fun of you for having no ass. They make fun of you for being skinny, or they make fun of you because your hips are not like the biggest hips in the world. So their identity is centered more so around their hips. You know, it's centered around her ass. That's why she feels like if you don't have an ass, you don't have anything. But if you have pretty privilege, you don't have to rely on the size of your ass in order to make heads turn. That's optional. Pretty privileged women, we have options when it comes to beauty, when it comes to sexuality. So we can choose to have a big butt, or we can just keep it small. I think I'm on number 4, meltdowns or rage. If she is not the prettiest in the room, or if someone outshines her. So, okay, think about a woman who is a butterface. So she has a nice body, bad face. And then think about when a pretty privileged and sexual privileged woman comes in the room. So let's say she has a pretty face and she has a pretty body. She has a nice butt, nice boobs. Okay, yeah, that's going to cause extreme rage when it comes to the butterface type, because she feels like, wow, I'm outshined by you. And so that's where you get these women that will start picking apart other women. There's more of a viciousness. There's more of a competitiveness, because a lot of women who they rely on sexualizing themselves, these women often don't have a lot of female friends. So oftentimes they surround themselves with misogynistic men. A lot of toxic men, they're very competitive. They want to dominate and subjugate others. So notice how a lot of sexualized women, they have almost this masculine, aggressive, dominating, domineering energy. Have you ever noticed that? This is the woman where as soon as you get hired at that new job and you're the pretty girl, she instantly comes up, wants to bully you. She instantly wants to report you for your outfit. Meanwhile, you don't even have an ass. What do you mean I'm getting reported for my outfit? I don't even have a butt. How am I being reported for my pants being too tight, or like, it's showing off too much of my body? There's no body to show off. But women who are constantly around toxic masculine men, because remember, toxic masculine men, those are the ones that care the most about sexualizing women. And, they want to sleep with as many sexualized women as possible. They get their self-esteem from sexualized women. So if it's a woman who sexualizes herself and she's just been around a whole bunch of toxic men, she starts to actually take on toxic masculine traits. Number 5, performative hyperfemininity. So the sexualized woman, she feels that pressure to always be on. Your body needs to pose a certain way. Have you ever been around the type of woman where she sexualizes herself so much that she can't even take a freaking photo of her face? She has to take a photo where it's like the perfect pose. Her legs have to be slightly open. She has to be like putting her hand between her legs a little bit. She makes you retake the picture 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. And then on top of that, maybe she has to filter it 5 or 6 times. She can only take a photo at certain times during the day. She's going to crop her face out of the photo. She only wants to show her boobs. She only wants to show her butt. Okay, so that is performative hyperfemininity. They always have to be on. A lot of these women will manipulate their voice. They manipulate different aspects of their personality, even in a situation where they don't have to, but they're trying to use sex as a manipulation tool. Okay, they're using sex as a way to get access to power. And so they're hoping that, hey, maybe if I change my voice, maybe if I change my personality, maybe if I'm more of a pick-me, then he will want to have sex with me and then I will have the power. So they don't start from a place of power. They're trying to finish in the place of power once he sleeps with them. So that's different from pretty privileged women. Pretty privileged women are starting off in a place of power. They walk in the room and the heads turn. She could be wearing a sweatshirt. She could be quote-unquote bad-bodied. This is why you have so many people that hate on plus-size women who are pretty privileged. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever had women where they hate on you? Maybe you're thicker. Maybe you have a stomach that's poking out, or like, they try to say, oh, you're bad-bodied. Okay, they're saying that because they're mad that you still have pretty privilege because your face card doesn't decline. They're not noticing your stomach. They're looking at your face because it's pretty. Or if you had pretty hair, pretty skin, whatever it is, you have the pretty privilege. So that's why sometimes you'll see sexualized women because their privilege comes from their body. That's why they feel like you have nothing, or like, you're at the bottom because you don't have the body that they have. You're not being sexualized for your body. So they feel like you have no power. Well, that's how you know that woman's saying that. She doesn't have pretty privilege. She has sexual privilege. Because if you have pretty privilege, you actually don't have to have the body. That's optional. If you want to have pretty body privilege as well as having pretty face privilege, okay, fine. But that's not a requirement. We all know that there are plenty of women who are like BBWs. That's why they call it a BBW. They don't say, oh, she's just big. No, they say she's a big, beautiful woman. So they're saying that her face card, or it could also be her body proportions or whatever, they're saying that is pretty. Okay, so that's a combination of both sexual privilege and pretty privilege. That's why I said that a woman cannot be a sex symbol in society if she doesn't have both the sex privilege and the pretty privilege. Name one sex symbol that has a hideous face who is known and like worshipped and put on a pedestal. Name one. I'll wait. I think I'm on number 6. One of the traumas of a sexualized woman is she cannot relax and be authentic. She may feel empty or anxious when she is not performing for the male gaze. So these are the women who are confident at night. They're confident in the club. They're confident when they're twerking. They're confident when they're dancing. They're confident in the bikini. They're confident showing their boobs. But as soon as you want to sit down and have an actual conversation with her, all of that confidence goes out the window. And so that's why you'll see these women that struggle in romantic relationships, but also even in their friendships as well. Because think about it. What does she have to talk about? What does she have in common with other women? Unless it's being male-centered and just talking about the last man you slept with. Like, if a woman centers her identity around her sexuality, think about it. If she doesn't have any hobbies, what else is there about her that makes her interesting? So that's why a lot of them, they don't know how to relax and be authentic. Because there's almost this emptiness because they're used to performing. Think about it. Sexual power, that's about performance. That's why they call it your sexual performance. Like, how do you perform in the bedroom? How do you seduce? How do you do the foreplay? How do you kiss? How do you do the chains and the whips and whatever else you're using? So that's all a performance. That's all about creating that fantasy. It's about sustaining the fantasy. So that is more of that's a sexual mindset. That's coming from a woman that has sexual privilege, but maybe not necessarily pretty privilege. So they're two different things. So that's why sometimes you'll see these women not knowing how to act when they are not in a sexualized environment. Okay, I think I'm on like number 6. Jealousy, comparison, and sabotage. She resents other women who are seen as more sexy, or she resents other women who outsex her. So these are women where maybe they have sex with rich men. They have a whole hierarchy within the community of sexualized women. This is why you'll see some women, they'll be like, oh, well, I got to sleep with a white man. I got to sleep with a Polish man. I got to sleep with XYZ type of man. Oh, well, I got to be with a rapper. Or they'll actually get jealous of women who do sleep with those types of men. So they'll hide behind projection, like They'll try to call those women names like, ha ha, that's why you slept with him and he left you. But that woman knows damn well that if a multimillionaire rapper wanted to sleep with her, she would jump at the opportunity to sleep with that man. By the way, a lot of these women struggle with comparison mindset. So sexualized women, these are the women who are in the club scene a lot, because the club scene favors sex culture. Obviously the club scene, that favors hookup culture. So that's why you'll see a lot of sexualized women complaining, I didn't get into the club. I didn't get into VIP. I couldn't go into the section with so-and-so celebrity. Okay, well, that's more, you wanted to have sexual privilege in that moment. Because in the club, you can have pretty privilege in the club, but, the club is pretty dark. People are, like, drunk. People are not necessarily, like, having conversations or looking at your face, especially a nightclub where it's crowded and there's a celebrity there. There are thousands of people there. No, usually the club culture is kind of adjacent to sex culture. It's adjacent more so to like hookup culture. So that's why you see the most sexualized women, or the women who sexualize themselves the most. That's why you see them getting so pissed and feeling so competitive when it comes to the club scene. Because think about the difference. If I'm a pretty privileged woman, and let's say the club is like really crowded, I don't want to go to the club, I can go sit in a little lounge, I can go to a little restaurant and get the same amount of attention. I can still have heads turning, I can still have people looking at me. I don't have to go and be the best twerker. I don't have to go and be the best dancer. I don't have to go and keep up with all the latest moves and how to move my booty and how to throw that ass in a circle. No, I don't have to keep up with all of that in order to get attention. So that's the difference between sexual privilege versus pretty privilege. Pretty privileged women, we can kind of rest. We can kind of rest in our femininity. We can kind of like rely on our face. Remember how on America's Next Top Model, they used to talk about how some of the models, they're like, oh, well, you're just relying on being pretty. Well, yeah, that's because you have that option. When your face card doesn't decline, yeah, you have the option to just rely on your face. But if your face card does decline and all you have is that booty, oh no, you have to get into the club. That's the only place, that's the main place where you're going to be seen. That's the main place where you could, get on a stage. That's why you'll see a lot of sexualized women hopping on top of the bar, hopping on top of the tables, because that is their stage. They don't have a metaphorical stage in real life. So that's why they have to hop on the bars and the tables and bend over so you can see their butt. Because they feel like, no, this is my best quality and I want to show it off. So that's another difference that a lot of content creators aren't talking about. Sexual privilege and pretty privilege are not the same. They have different, there's a different way to navigate each one. There are different settings that favor each one. Sexual privilege, that's more favored by the club culture. It's favored by social media culture as well. So this is also why you see women who rely on sexual privilege because they don't have the pretty privilege. They feel like their face card declines. This is why you see those women complaining, she got more likes than me. She got more likes than me on Instagram. She got more likes than me on the dating app. She gets more clicks on the algorithm. Well, that's because a lot of algorithms can also favor sexual images and stuff as well. Sex sells. So, of course, women who rely on sexual privilege more than anything, of course they care about who gets the most likes. Yeah, because they feel like that is a metric of your sexual desirability. Whereas pretty privileged women, have you ever noticed, a lot of pretty privileged women, we have the option. Once again, it's an option. We don't have to even be on social media at all. There are plenty of pretty women, they deleted their dating app. They deleted their Instagram. They deleted everything because they go out in real life. They can get attention at the grocery store. So it's kind of the difference between, basically the setting where you get the attention is different. So like if a woman is pretty privileged, she gets likes in real life, if that makes sense. So somebody might walk up to her and say, oh, you're so pretty, as opposed to double clicking on an Instagram post. So that's the difference. That's a different setting where pretty privilege is kind of favored versus sexual privilege is favored. So that's why you see a lot of women who rely on sexual privilege, they complain the most about like social media and the music industry. Who's the hottest rapper? The rap culture, the female rap culture, that is probably the most sexualized genre in the music industry. Why are there women who are jealous of rappers and they're pissed off and saying, I don't have enough representation? Well, she wants her sexual representation. That's why. So that's a woman who relies on sexual privilege as opposed to pretty privilege. So she feels like her face card declines. So she feels like, look, if I can't get attention for my face, I know that in music culture, especially in rap culture, they definitely favor like sexualization, twerking, and all that. So I know I have the same ass. I have just as good of an ass. Actually, I'm better at twerking than Ice Spice. I'm a better dancer than Tyla. Why are they getting all the attention with their sexy outfits on? That's not fair. Okay, so whatever setting that woman is fighting to be in, that's how you know what type of privilege she's trying to tap into. Okay, so club culture, social media culture, hookup culture, dating culture, the casual sex. Okay, obviously that favors sexual privilege. And then pretty privilege is pretty much everything else. So you can have pretty privilege in the workplace. You can have pretty privilege on social media as well. But I noticed if a woman has pretty privilege on social media, she's showing her face more. So these are the women where, or if they are sexualizing themselves, they're doing both. They're showing their face and the sexy body. So for example, Ruby Rose. And then if a woman does not want to sexualize herself, she doesn't have to. For example, the makeup women, the women that do the makeup, they're just using their face only. They don't have to show their body. They just chose not to. It's not that they can't show their body. They have the option. So there's a little bit more fluidity, I would say, when it comes to pretty privilege. Whereas with sexual privilege, I feel like there's a lot more of a rigid, strict, there are almost like rules when it comes to sexual privilege and where you can use it and how you can use it. And a part of this has to do with sex being kind of taboo, like in our country and stuff. Obviously, they have all kinds of laws about sex. Like, there's the Me Too movement. There's sexual harassment. You can't do that. So it's more, I would say it's more controlled. And then obviously it's dominated by men. Who created porn? Men. Who's in charge of the Hollywood, like the rap industry and all that? Men. So that's why I say it tends to be more male-centered. And then you have to go to specific settings where your exact sexuality or your exact body type is the most sexualized. Oh, and that's another thing. They deal with more fetishization. So only being viewed as their body, not being valued for who they are as a human being. So basically being treated as replaceable. Being treated as replaceable. Like, oh, you're just a body anyway. You're just a pair of warm thighs I can have in my bed at night. So a lot of them have that trauma of feeling more replaceable. Because like I said, every woman has sexual privilege, but every woman does not have pretty privilege. Every woman has those same body parts, but every woman does not have a face card that doesn't decline. I think I'm on number 5. One of the tactics that a sexualized woman will use, she actually has more of a tendency to tear other women down. They'll say things like, oh, she only looks like that because of surgery. Have you ever noticed that sexualized women tend to shame body surgeries the most? They talk so much shit about BBLs. I'm like, oh my God, if you were happy with your body, you would not be so obsessed with tearing down women who have BBLs. Like for me, I'm happy with my body. I have no ass, okay? I have a little booty. So I'm happy with my body. So why would I be over here staring at random women with BBLs, trying to memorize who has a BBL, who doesn't, capturing pictures of them, trying to post images of them like, oh, her BBL looks bad. Her thighs don't even match. Why would I do that? I'm happy with my body. I'm enjoying my skinny body. But I've noticed that women who, they rely on sexual privilege, that's their avenue for success. Yeah, that is going to make them jealous. The BBL, because your BBL, like your butt, obviously that is a very sexual body part. That's probably one of the most sexualized body parts. So believe it or not, women actually can get jealous of surgeries. They actually can get jealous of body surgeries, especially sexualized women. Women who rely on sexual privilege, hell yeah, they're going to get pissed that you just had a baby and you got a tummy tuck. Hell yeah, they're going to get pissed that you just got a boob job, you just got a breast lift. Yeah, because she feels like, hey, I compete with others using my breasts. So that's not fair that she got a brand new boob job. I compete with other women using my butt size. So that's not fair that she got a BBL that looks better than mine. So believe it or not, a lot of them tend to compete in terms of surgeries. And then with pretty privilege, you'll see the women who value pretty privilege more, they will try to talk shit about other women's face card. They'll be like, oh, well, she's using a filter on her face. Well, why are you saying that? Well, it's because you're jealous of her pretty face. So that's why you're trying to discount her pretty face. You're trying to say she doesn't really have a face that's that pretty. So do you see how it kind of switches? So with sexualized women, they're focused on, oh, your body's not even that cute. And then with pretty privileged women, when it comes to the jealousy, they're like, oh, your face isn't even that cute, or your hair isn't even that pretty. Your skin isn't that pretty. You have acne marks. So, depending on the types of jealousy that they give you, you can tell like which one do they value, which one are they viewing you as competition with. So if they're talking shit about your body, sexual competition. If they're talking shit about your face, hair, acne marks, etc., beauty competition. So they feel like you're beating them in those areas. That's why they feel like they want to try to call out the flaw. It's to knock you down off of that pedestal. They're like, oh no, I'm not going to let other people perceive her as having a pretty face. Oh no, I don't want other people to perceive her as having a sexy body. Oh, I'm calling out the fact that she got a BBL. I'm calling out the fact that she got a tummy tuck. I think I'm on number 6. May get into sexual competition with friends, or even quote unquote steal someone's partner to feel superior. So this is definitely a tactic of insecure women who try to use sexual privilege against you. They get a high off of sleeping with their sister's boyfriend or sleeping with their friend's man because it makes her feel like, yeah, I'm sexier than her. And I've seen a lot of women do this, especially against pretty privileged women. They'll be like, she may be pretty, but I'm sexy. She may have a pretty face, but I have a sexy body. I know how to move my butt more than her. Have you ever noticed that some women make fun of you for not being able to dance? Dancing, that's a part of sexual privilege, because a lot of men obviously sexualize your body. So if you're moving your body in a sensual way, like I said, club culture, you're moving your body in a sensual way. So that's why they try to make fun of you if you can't dance. They feel like you are sexually disadvantaged because people relate dancing to sex and like how you're going to move in the bedroom. So they feel like, if you don't know how to move your booty, if you don't know how to twerk or whine or whatever, then you must be bad in bed. That's why you see some women making fun of other women who can't dance well. They'll be like, oh, she's stiff. Why do you care if she's stiff? It's because you're comparing her to yourself sexually. You're telling yourself, oh, she's stiff when she's dancing, so she must be stiff in the bedroom. So, I have an advantage because I know how to move better in the bedroom. So that's one of the coping mechanisms of women that sexualize themselves. Number 7, toxic relationship patterns. They choose emotionally unavailable or disrespectful men because those are the men who show the most lust. Because remember, if you're using sexual privilege, that works with the most lustful men. Whoever the most lustful man is, whoever has the strongest sexual desires, that's the one that's going to be your target if you're just using, the sexual privilege. So that's why you see a lot of women who over-sexualize themselves in the most toxic relationships. It's funny because they'll talk about decentering men. It's hilarious. They'll say that like we are the extreme ones. No, try being a woman who sexualizes yourself. Maybe you have like a lot of men that you've slept with, and all of those men are emotionally unavailable, disrespectful, misogynist, toxic masculine men. That's a level of trauma I can't even imagine having. I can't even imagine having that level of deep-seated wounding from those types of men. Those are going to be the types of men they attract. The women who sexualize themselves the most, they're going to attract men who also sexualize themselves, or they sexualize women. So imagine having a series of dozens, if not hundreds of men who are just like that. So, that's a toxic relationship pattern. And then when those women want to get in a relationship, let's say that woman wants marriage or something, or let's say she ends up having a kid, and maybe she wants her kid to have like a father figure, they deal with a whole other level of trauma to unpack. Basically, the traumas are different for a woman who uses sexual privilege versus pretty privilege. Number 7, may stay in situationships, casual relationships, or allow degrading treatment because the attention feels like proof that she is wanted. So it's almost this mindset of, I'd rather be wanted for my body than not be wanted at all. That's one of the cons of engaging in kind of like the sexual privilege and not having the pretty privilege. Number 7. Wait, I don't know what number I'm on. Crap. Discloses intimate details too soon and mistakes it as confidence or boldness. Have you ever had a woman try to accuse you of being insecure? So if you don't get on the table and twerk, you're insecure. If you don't sleep with a guy within the first 2 weeks, you're insecure. You're not confident. I'm just sexually confident and liberated, and you're not. Have you ever noticed that? And it's like, no, sometimes it's not that they're more confident, it's that they are actually just oversharing and they don't have any boundaries. That's really what it is. And obviously that's for her to decide. I'm not saying that women like can't have sex or whatever, but if somebody is trying to push their beliefs onto me, oh yeah, I give them the side eye. Because if you're truly happy with your life, why are you comparing it to mine and why are you making fun of mine? Number 8, may feel uncomfortable with quiet, modest, or wholesome girls, seeing them as fake or judgmental. So these are the women who are like, why are you just wearing jeans? You need to wear some booty shorts. You need to show off more of your boobs. And it's like, sis, there are many different ways to be attractive. Like, why are you making it like the only way she can be pretty is if she shows her ass? No, that's the only way you can be pretty, because your butt cheeks are the prettiest part of you. But if a woman has a pretty face, that's enough for her, and that's okay. Everybody doesn't have to, like express themselves the same way. But women who rely on sexual privilege, they actually might get triggered by someone who does not rely on that same privilege. They get triggered because they're like, wait, I had to do all this just to get attention, so that's not fair that she can just sit there and be quiet and introverted and she still gets attention. That's not fair. Because I had to be loud and obnoxious. I had to yell and shout and twerk on tables, and I had to be super aggressive with these men and like talk about sex within the first 5 minutes. And then she just gets to sit there and smile. And then she still gets attention and she gets treated like a princess. Number 8, depression, shame, and identity confusion. So she may have this confusion where it's like, who am I if I'm not sexy or desired by men? So these are, like I said, the male-centered women. So their self-esteem revolves around their sexual desirability. So these women are subconsciously questioning themselves, okay, who am I outside of my body? What do I have to offer this world? Not just men. What do I have to offer this world outside of my vagina? When I'm not having sex, what am I doing with the rest of my time? So a lot of them have this confusion, almost like this feeling of emptiness. That's one of the cons of relying on sexualization without the pretty privilege. And then I want to talk about the root causes of having hierarchy thinking. So this mindset that sexual privilege is the most important, it's the highest privilege you can have. What are some of the root causes of that mindset? Well, number 1 is the feeling that being sexy equals safety, love, and protection. So she feels like, if a man is sexually attracted to me, he's going to want to be around me. He will naturally show me love. Have you ever noticed that? Some women are like, oh, I just wanted him to show me some love. What does that mean, showing you love? It means compliments. It means attention. It means affection. It means holding her hand. It means giving her a hug, calling her, texting her. Okay, so she feels like her only doorway to get those actions is by being sexy. Number 2, absent or neglectful male role models. So you guys are hearing people talking about father wounds, or they're accusing the exoticals of like not having fathers. Well, actually, did you know that if a woman is sexualizing herself, if she doesn't have pretty privilege and she feels like the main privilege she wants to rely on is sexual privilege, oftentimes these women do have absent or neglectful male role models. So not just a father, but this could be brothers, fathers, pastors, coaches, teachers, whatever. Because any normal, healthy man in your life, like a family member, he will tell you like, hey, you may not want to just randomly do that because then men will use you for sex. But some women, they really don't know that men actually do just use women for sex and they discard them. Some women genuinely do not know that sex and love are not the same thing. And part of that is because they don't have a man in their life that will expose those other men. Or if you're an orphan or something, maybe your parents have passed away. Sometimes these women, they don't go out and research and learn. And they're not educated on male nature. They're not educated on how men work. Like just because you sleep with a guy, it doesn't mean that he's going to like you more. It doesn't mean that he's going to be more loyal or more faithful. But some women who try to use sex as a way to maintain their relationship, I call it maintenance sex. Those women, they're uneducated about the nature of men, and they're also uneducated about what a relationship is. So they're just looking to get their needs met. They're using sex as a transaction, basically. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.